Hi guys. Cool. Thank you for joining me. First post GDC stream. Um, Anybody have any questions about Half-Life, about any of the GDC stuff that I posted last week, or anything in general? Or about the new forum. I spent some time this afternoon putting together a WordPress forum for us, using what appears to be a popular forum theme. So if you go over to undefinedbehavior.com/forum, you should be able to create an account and post topics, answer topics. Hopefully that's going to work out well for everybody. I put in sort of a little summary of the Papoyo play-by-play, and then posted some sort of like questions for the audience, stuff that I would love to get your take on. Either design things that I didn't really talk about at the time, but I've been thinking about since, or other things that have come up, or that kind of stuff, just to spur some discussion. So hopefully that's interesting to everybody. It seemed like that was something that people were looking for. Welcome feedback on the forum, as well as obviously the show. Still sort of figuring out what this is and how it's going to work. But really excited about it, and really, really excited about the community that's developed around it. Okay, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the title of the Apprehension chapter at the very end, seeing as how I had thoughts on it when I entered the chapter. Okay, so I'm spectacularly bad at this. The Apprehension chapter, I remember when it started, mostly, I think, because I actually commented on it. Although now I'm actually forgetting. I feel like the Apprehension chapter started with the sort of underwater stuff, and right around the time that I got the crossbow, or the tranquilizer gun, or whatever that is. And it had I think it was after all of the tram stuff, though, right? Pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that my comments were that I had sort of I felt like I mastered a section and I was doing really well, and then they sort of changed up and threw me into water, and water was much harder to deal with, and started with a tram crash, I think. So that, as a changing the mood going into that section, I felt really, really strongly about. I felt like that was really well done. How long did the Apprehension chapter last? That I don't really have a good sense of. Because we're not still in it, right? Like the little chapters that have popped up, those are all separate chapters, I think. I don't have an incredible sense of the structure of the game, and I'm often noticing sort of chapter headings as they come up, but they're not sticking to me as like part of the experience. I don't know how long Apprehension lasted. If somebody wants to give me a hint as to what was covered by Apprehension, I can try to synthesize what I felt about that as a whole chapter. Have I played Half-Life 2? Yeah. So I've talked about this a little bit in the past. How well do I think the game has evolved? And did Valve address most or any problems That was somebody breaking real hard. Did Valve address most or any of the problems that I feel Half-Life 1 has? A lot of the problems that I feel like Half-Life 1 has are based on its age more than anything else. I feel like it's got a pretty early physics engine, implementation of physics that causes problems. I feel like there's some roughness around the edges of some of the level design and experience design, and some of the like queuing has obviously I've had trouble with, some in terms of the levels and also in terms of how I'm supposed to get through sections, specifically the great big octopus monster in the rocket chamber. Like that was just, I should have known better. I should have figured that out. So Half-Life 2, I think, absolutely evolves the genre. I think it takes Half-Life 1 and it moves it forward. I think it adds a lot of new things. It's got more interesting secondary characters. It's got better physics. It's got some similar but continues to be really good experience, like not just set pieces but also kind of like these contained experiences. What is the name of the zombie town? Ravenloft or Ravenholm, or one of those I think is a D&D module, and one of them is maybe a town in Half-Life. Anyway, that whole segment is like really well done with the gravity gun. I still have some problems with the level design, which is weird because I know Valve does really strong level design, and honestly in other games I don't have a problem with it, but I find myself consistently going the wrong direction in Half-Life 2 in a way that tends to be really frustrating. The vehicle sections in Half-Life 2 were more annoying than fun, I found. Again, I think that's to some extent the age of the game. A lot of games, Half-Life 1 doesn't have vehicles, or at least it hasn't yet. In 1997, I don't think there were a lot of games with vehicle sections. In 2004, whenever Half-Life 2 came out, that was much more of a thing, and you had like the Warthog in Halo, and even a few years later, you had Mass Effect 1 with its whatever that vehicle section was that was terrible. But like early games like that would often have these terrible vehicle sections, because having a vehicle section was such a selling point that even if the gameplay was hard to get right, and they would work on it a lot and they would never quite get it to a place where it was fun, they still had to ship with it because it was such a big feature of the product that they couldn't not ship with it. And I think it's still very hard to get right. I think we probably have more institutional experience getting it right, and there's also probably more willingness to cut that kind of feature early if it's not working. So Half-Life 2, I think, had problems with the vehicles. The biggest problem that I had with it was narrative. And I'm really curious to see how Half-Life ends. This is one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to play Half-Life. Half-Life 2, I had no real sense of who I was as a character, and I had no real sense of the world that I was entering, because obviously I didn't have any like background. I just knew that like somehow I was a known figure. I was like this freedom fighter in a world that was admittedly like pretty locked down, right-wing fascist. And then I played for, I don't know, 10 hours of the game or something like that, and killed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of policemen, like in a city, like running around a city just murdering policemen left and right. Like, and it got to the point where I couldn't deal with that. I just felt like I was the greatest serial killer in the history of the world. And yeah, these are people who are shooting at me because I'm like a revolutionary or something. But it felt like they're just these people who are doing their jobs, and I didn't have a great sense of like what I was trying to accomplish. So it's not like I was burning with this inner fire, like to some kind of holy righteousness. I was just, going about my business as apparently a revolutionary, killing policemen left and right. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't stomach it. So between the other frustrations that I had, and I think I actually stopped like at the beginning of a vehicle section because that was the last straw. But really, it was narratively, I didn't have a sense of context. I didn't have a sense of purpose, and the game was asking me to do too much without those things. This game doesn't have that. This game, I have killed a whole bunch of soldiers, but I don't really feel bad about it. I feel bad about like letting my scientist friends walk into hails of bullets, but they're kind of too stupid to live. So I don't feel that bad about it. I would prefer not to have to kill all of these people, but I also feel like I'm trying to survive. I feel like a survivor, and I feel like I have a mission to like shut this down. That if I can get to Lambda, they're going to be able to do something. So it feels more justified, right? Like I'm not second guessing it all the time the way that I sort of was in Half-Life 2. That's my answer to that. Okay. Unemployed Shaka, thank you. So after the trams, after the crash, like more or less what I was talking about, I felt apprehensive. The apprehension chapter, I was feeling the emotion of apprehension, and then at the end of the chapter, I was literally apprehended by guards. I did not make that connection at all. Like I said, the chapter titles kind of they float by me. I pay attention to them when they come up on the screen, but I don't have a great sense at any moment in time what chapter I'm actually in. And I think if I knew the game better, that would change. Like they would become familiar to me. Certainly they are themed, and like the blast pit was all the rocket testing chamber, and clearly that was the blast pit. That's been the strongest one in my mind. That's the one that I'm like most aware of what was contained in that chapter. Apprehension, I don't have a specific comment on it. I think it's very, very clever. Somebody had a very, very clever moment in designing the narrative structure of that and naming that chapter, which I appreciate. But I don't think it's oh shoot, my chat. Yeah, look at this. Yes. I mean, I don't think it's like a major feature of the experience of the game, especially because when you're just playing it, I think you have kind of less of a sense of what the chapters are. But it is super clever. It's very, very, very funny. point on queuing is interesting because it feels like modern gamers expect to get through a section in 1 or 2 tries, while in the day Half-Life was made, it was expected players take advantage of the quick save and load functions and retry sections multiple times to fully explore the possibilities. So is it really a queuing problem or just the aging of the design and player expectations? I think it's both. Definitely, like, I have gotten a lot more used to using the quick save over the course of the game, and I think the entire first half-hour segment that I played, I didn't save the game at all, and chat was like freaking out at me at the end of it to save my game. And then actually, I think well into the second segment, I was pressing the wrong button and wasn't actually quick saving at all. So clearly I was coming from a different mentality, right? I was coming from, was I coming from Hotline Miami? Which in the same way, like, you replay over and over and over again, but it does it with an autosave. And so you're not quick saving in the same way. That's not part of the language of the game. I've gotten used to that. You see me quick saving all of the time now, and you see me. I've talked about sort of making the decision to either reload a previous save or push on, depending on whether I think I've gotten through the hard part and there's going to be a rest area up ahead, or if I could redo a section and have it turn out a lot better. And frequently I just get killed. This whole thing with the tank, I think, was actually a really interesting demonstration of, I was pretty sure that there was no way for me to get past the tank. And it turns out that there's just like a 10% chance that I'll get past the tank at any given try. And so if I can use my quick save at various segments, then I can totally do it. I just can't do it like on one try. And we'll see if that turns out to have been a good thing or not. But so I think the quick save is really important, and the game is teaching me to use the quick save just because it's so convenient and it allows me to do so much. But at the same time, I don't think the quick save replaces the queuing that I want in a level. When I talk about queuing, I mostly mean that there's some kind of a puzzle. And usually I'm talking about a spatial puzzle. So like there's a direction that I'm supposed to go and I have to figure out what that direction is. And that could be a really, really simple puzzle. In a trivial case, there's just a turn in the hallway and I need to know that I'm supposed to make the turn. And it's pretty obvious because that's the way that the hallway goes. But maybe there's a door that I'm supposed to go through and it's possible for me to just walk past it. So when I talk about queuing, I'm talking about, like, do you put a sign next to the door that suggests that I pay attention to it? Do you paint it a different color that draws my attention? Do you, put even a little flashing light above it if it's really important and players tend to walk past it without going in? In the same way, when you put an obstacle in my path and I'm supposed to figure out a way to get around it, whether that's spatial or logical, whether there's literally a path that I'm supposed to take, under it or around it or whatever, or if there's a puzzle that I'm supposed to solve, I'm supposed to flip a switch that's somewhere else or flip a series of switches. How well do you indicate to me, first of all, the kind of thing that I'm supposed to be looking for, and then secondly, the specific thing that I'm looking for? And I think that quick save and reload doesn't help me a whole lot there, because even if I can, it improves my survivability, but it doesn't necessarily help me explore the space any better. And that's really what is necessary. If you don't have a good queuing system, then you end up needing to, like, exhaustively search the space, often several times before you find the thing that you're looking for. And that I feel like is generally a problem. Now, if it's a confined enough space, and I mean, so the mech is a great example. Like the trick for the mech was I had to actually leave the area that felt like a self-contained little area, go out into the extremely dangerous area where the mech was, and then choose the right path to go down there. There were several paths, and I tried at least 2 of them, and they were dead ends. And there was a third one that I didn't try right away. Ideally, the game would be structured, like the level would be designed so that the first path that I go down, because it's the most obvious path, because it's the path that most draws my attention, is the one that I'm supposed to go down. And then as a gamer, what I can do is say, well, obviously that's the way I'm supposed to go. I'm going to explore. I want to explore the space. I want to see if there's anything in these other areas, because often a game will put like secrets, put med kits and things down other, non-primary directions. The difference between fully exploring a space and knowing where I'm supposed to go and choosing not to go there, and fully exploring a space because I can't figure out where to go, the experiential difference between those two things is enormous. One of them feels extremely powerful, feels like I have a lot of agency, that I'm totally in charge of what's going on and what I'm doing. And the other one feels like I'm just lost. And so even if the heat map of my movements are essentially exactly the same in both cases, in one of them I feel I actually am very likely to feel flow. I'm very likely to feel like I'm in the zone, I'm doing what I want to do, I'm in control. And in the other one, I'm very likely to feel frustrated and confused, and quickly that moves into bored. And then you've lost engagement with the player, and that's not what you want. I ended up way back in the comments, so I'm just going to keep looking at older questions. Sorry, guys. Playing through an older game like this where the fidelity of the physics is so wonky compared to today, you can really see what developers have focused on improving over the years. What, if anything, about games today do you hope or think will make as big of strides in the next 15 years? Oh man, that's such a good question. Honestly, social simulation. I'm really, really excited for us to make some strides there. And there are designers that have done really, really interesting things with social simulation on a small scale. But it's rarely integrated in a sort of comprehensive way into a larger game. And it's rarely sort of done as part of a larger simulation. So you'll have relationships between the player and other characters, and you can model social behavior in an interesting way between those things, but you will rarely have, for example, social interactions between NPCs that then are like second degree interactions that the player only sees. What am I trying to say? They're interactions that the player sees second degree consequences of. So the player isn't actually like interacting with two NPCs who are interacting. Two NPCs interact off screen, and then you can see the result of that. All of that stuff, like, people are experimenting with it, especially in a lot of like really alternative academic games like Facade by Michael Mateus, and Prom Night, which also I think comes out of UC Santa Cruz. UC Santa Cruz does a lot of this kind of thing. And then Emily Short, who's one of my favorite designers, has done some really interesting like one-on-one social modeling with like Alabaster, which is a fantastic game, which that should go on my list. I should totally play Alabaster. That would be a fun one. So like, there's lots of experimentation. And then you've got things like Fallout, right? Fallout or Skyrim or these big sandboxy open world games that are faction based will often have some kind of underlying social simulation going on. It feels kind of primitive. It feels like the physics feel in Half-Life, and I would love to see in 15 years that we've smoothed that out in an interesting way and created some really, really cool experiences out of that kind of simulation. So, I mean, I think there are lots of potential answers to that question. That's the one that comes to mind first. What do you think of the interpretation of the suit in Half-Life and Half-Life 2 represents a sort of protective mother figure? Yeah, interesting. I don't know that I would have jumped to mother figure, but I think that's not wrong. So in my mind, the suit in Half-Life is essentially embodying an archetype that's pretty common in video games, and it's you see it as Cortana in Halo, you see it as Navi in Ocarina of Time. It's the sort of I call it often the angel on your shoulder archetype. It's the sort of pseudo character that accompanies the player character to help out, mostly by offering advice, by like whispering in your ear. Different than like Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite or Ellie in The Last of Us, who are like real actual characters who exist in the world and move around and like do stuff. The angel on your shoulder is may like have a visual representation, but it doesn't really have a physical representation. It's just kind of attached to you, and it follows you around and just talks at you. And so that's the first thing that my mind goes to when I think about the suit in Half-Life. Describing that as a protective mother figure, I mean, I think it's absolutely a protective figure. And there's something potentially maternal about it. I mean, I think it's interesting that most of the examples that I can think of, certainly like Cortana and Navi, suggest femininity. The suit has kind of an androgynous voice, but I could read it as feminine if I tried to. So yeah, I think going off of that, like bouncing off of that, it's certainly protective, and I can definitely see how there's like a maternal thing attached to it. I think that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I guess to that extent, I agree with that interpretation. I think that it makes a lot of sense. Does that answer the question, I guess? Okay. Loved doing something breakfasty tweets during GDC. What is my favorite breakfast food? Oh man, that's hard. All of them. When I go to a breakfast, like when I go to a restaurant for breakfast, I am faced with such analysis paralysis. I I cannot make a choice because everything sounds remarkably good. Pancakes, waffles, omelets. I mean, like mostly those things and variations on those things. But also, okay, here's what I'm going to answer, even if it's not strictly true. My grandfather, before he died, owned a store, like a little like corner market with my grandmother, and I was young, and they would invite me to go up there for like maybe a couple months over the summer and like work the cash register and pretend that I worked in a store, and I was really, too young to have that experience or get that experience, but it was a great experience for me, and it was mostly an experience of spending time with my grandparents. They would serve breakfast and maybe lunch, and they had like a soft serve ice cream machine. But my grandfather's specialty was peanut butter and fried egg sandwich. And he would like make that. He had a griddle in the back, and he would make those for customers, and he would make them for me. And that's really good. That's a combination of tastes that I appreciate, and I have made for myself since then. I don't usually see it in restaurants, but I think about those summers that I would spend with them when I have that. So that's pretty good. Oh, God. Eve asks if there's one game we should be looking into right now design-wise, what would it be? Oh, boy. I need to think about that. Design-wise. There are so many good games out there is the thing. I'm gonna think about this. I'm gonna think about this, and I'm gonna try to actually really give you an answer at some point. But that's too big a question. I'm thinking about a half a dozen games that have come out in the last 5 years that were really cool, but none of them seem like the one. And I'm sure that there's a hundred. Well, maybe not 100, but there's at least like a score of games that are out right now that could be answers to this question that I'm just not thinking of. Portal might be my like cheap answer, because that game is so old now that it's I'm sure it's not the actual like the one, but it is a classic, and it is really well done from a puzzle standpoint, like puzzle progression standpoint, from a narrative standpoint, from a like narrative structure, from a character standpoint, from a design experience around the turn that happens like 2/3 of the way through the game. Is really, really well manufactured. All of the level design is just stellar, and then even the marketing for that game and for Portal 2. Portal 2 is mostly more of the same. Is also really, really excellent. So those, I think those games are. You can't go wrong. Playing those and studying those, but I'm sure that there's newer stuff that is also really, really worth looking at. I'll think about this. Does Sean Plott act the same in real life as he does online? Yeah, I think. He's. Yes, Sean is such an incredibly fantastic human being. I mean, he is so thoughtful, very, very positive, especially about other people. And he'll get down on himself, and he'll get down on like systemic things. He'll get frustrated at, like, I don't know, what's going on at work or whatever. But he is so positive about the people in his life. He just makes you sort of feel good about talking to him. He's got like really, really good positive energy, and he's considerate. Like he really, when he listens to you, it feels like he's really listening to you. He'll make insightful comments. He's really smart. He's a great guy. He's like just a super, super great guy. I can't say good enough stuff. Follow-up question from earlier. Do I think there's a lack of queuing in the area that I just stopped? It seems like the goal is pretty clear, the ladder to the roof that I couldn't reach from the ground floor. I just haven't figured out how to get there. Yeah, that could be. There's a little bit of ambiguity, I think, is my biggest problem, because there are a couple different paths. There are a couple different doors that don't seem to open, and there's a ladder that I can't reach. And so where am I supposed to be focusing my energy? Am I supposed to be figuring out how to reach the ladder that I can't reach? Am I supposed to be figuring out how to open the doors that I can't open? Or am I supposed to be actually finding a different path out that's somewhere in the space that I haven't explored? Because the space is large enough that conceivably there's something that I missed. I don't think that there is, but and those ladders are awfully conspicuous. I will absolutely say that, but it's also not at all clear to me how I'm supposed to get to them. So yeah. So that's a good question. And those stupid guns, I find that a really frustrating design decision in pretty much every single place that we've seen them, because they're not super hard to get past if you know exactly what you're doing, but they discourage you from exploring in a really significant way, and the game kind of demands that you do a lot of exploring. And so I find that a little incomprehensible that they would put those around in the places where they put them. Chad is talking about Muppets and Pants. Okay. On GDC posts for the binary decisions and emotional states, do players know the outcomes of these to get their desirable ones, or do they have to try it and reload? So at GDC, I went to a whole bunch of really amazing talks. I was really, really impressed by GDC this year. I have been to conferences in the past and GDCs in the past where I'm disappointed by the talks that I saw, and kind of really let down and bummed out. This year, it seemed like the quality of everything was really high, and I went to a couple talks that were sort of mediocre. All of the rest of them that I went to were great. I talked to other people who made different choices than I did, which is always a stressful thing of like, which talk are you going to go to if you go to a talk and it's no good and you feel like you missed out on the good talk. I talked to other people who went to different things that were also fantastic at the same time that I was at something fantastic, and that just feels like everybody's a winner. So one of the really cool talks that I saw, there were two of them that were essentially paired. The first one was research. Somebody had done like pretty extensive research on the binary morality decision trees that are very common in a lot of games these days. Especially, for example, like Mass Effect or KOTOR or and then even games that don't track it explicitly as like Paragon Renegade, but all of my examples are BioWare games, but like Dragon Age. Also things like The Walking Dead, or sort of any of the Telltale games. A lot of these narrative-driven games will take one of two approaches. They'll either be faction-based or they'll be this sort of binary morality-based. And then if they're binary morality, then there's pretty explicitly good decisions and bad decisions. But by which I mean like sort of morally right, morally positive decisions and evil decisions. Oh, Fable is another great example. So Fable, this was like the whole marketing behind Fable was you could either be good or you could be evil. And one of the anecdotes that the speaker talked about was Peter Molyneux at a conference after Fable launched, kind of getting really frustrated with everybody because they had spent so much time putting in all of this content that's good content and all of this bad content. And something like 10% of people saw, I don't remember exactly how it works, but like he was and this was not a statistic, this was just him complaining, so I'm sure it was exaggerated, but his exaggeration was only 10% of people see the all of the content that we put in on the evil side, because everybody makes like good decisions. And this is something that I think we know generally as designers, and there's been a lot of like trying to figure out how to address this in these kinds of games. And so a lot of it has to do with having branches that quickly come back together. And so there's not a lot of content that you miss by making decisions one way or another. But it still feels like you're making decisions one way or another. Or we have a tracking system where you can get karma or lose karma depending on the kind of decision that you make. But the narrative results are mostly the same. So a lot of that is attempting to address this perceived problem of missing out on content. This was a woman who had done a study that basically showed in these games in general, players who play through with the intention of playing once make mostly good decisions, mostly, morally good decisions, and avoid the evil decisions. But then there's a big segment of players who plan to play through twice. And they will play through the first time making all good decisions. And then they'll play through a second time making all evil decisions. So it's actually the people who play through only once tend to make more of a mix of decisions. They'll decide moment to moment whether they want to go the good way or the bad way. But they'll tend overwhelmingly to go the good way. And then the people who are going to play twice, they will play all good, and then they'll play all evil. This was just fascinating to sort of see research behind this. So the question that Unemployed Shaku asked is, do players know the outcomes of these decisions to get their desired ones, or are they trying one way and reloading when it works or it doesn't work, when it turns out, however it turns out? For the most part, so I don't know the answer to this. I don't have any data that backs up one way or another. But I think what happens is, for the most part, these games are designed so that what the morally right and the morally wrong choices are. You know what the two binary decisions are. Especially in the games where you are tracked, where you have karma or paragon points or light side points or whatever you have. In those games, it's especially because there's like an explicit mechanical significance to these decisions. They tend to be very, very clear, which is the good way and the evil way. Now, the consequences of doing them is not always as clear. In like BioShock, for example, it's clear what the good decision is to save all of the little sisters, and the bad decision is to harvest them. But it's not clear exactly what the consequences of each of those things is going to be. You can tell that like you get incrementally more powerful when you harvest the sisters, but you have to free like 3 of them before they start rewarding you for freeing them. And so it's not immediately obvious like what exactly is what are the long-term repercussions of the 2 things that you're deciding. There are some games that play with the ambiguity of long-term repercussions in an interesting way, but it's something that you have to be really careful about, because in general, if players think that they understand what the consequences of a choice are going to be, and then you change that, that's a recipe for a bad experience. For the most part, players aren't looking to save and reload at each one of these choices. Now, you can do... There was another talk by somebody who was one of the writers on 80 Days, which is a very cool little iPhone, iPad game that's actually like pretty remarkable from a narrative design standpoint. That game has a couple of moments where you interact with the slave trade, and I think the way that it works is there's a very, very fast ship that you can take that is a slaver ship. Like it's delivering slaves to some place, and you can hitch a ride, and it's great. Like it's super speedy. It gets you where you're trying to go much faster. But then once you get to that place, the only way to get out of that city is to take another ship that is actually a slave hunting ship. So you have to go on a like slave hunting expedition, which is not a strong mechanical penalty. I don't think it's just a narrative penalty, because people get really freaked out about having to participate in that. So that's a way that they in that game sort of give you a situation where you don't know what the consequences are, but you still like. It tends to be rare that you're not gonna know which choice is the good choice versus the evil choice. You're gonna sort of make that deliberately, and the game may reward one over the other, and sometimes people will sort of go back and restart in order to see what the consequences of another choice would be. But I think generally what people do is they play through, if people are interested in that kind of thing, they'll play through one way the whole game, and then they'll go and they'll play through the other way the whole game. Yeah. Okay, one more question. Looking at questions. The Witcher. I haven't played The Witcher, but I understand it also has some interesting moral choice aspects to it. Okay. So I'm not seeing a lot of other questions. How How are you tonight? Okay, I'll go with that. I'm good. I'm riding a high of coming back from this conference that was really positive. It was actually, this was maybe one of my most positive conference experiences because the talks were really good. I actually went out and I participated in a bunch of social events. I met some people that I had not seen in a long time and got to catch up with them. I met some people that I had never met before and got to know them. I feel like it has taken me, my first GDC was 10 years ago. I was thinking about it as I walked home one night, and I passed the Metropolis Hotel, I think is where I stayed, with like 3 other guys in a tiny little hotel room while I was in the probably my senior year of college, and we stayed up all night, or 2 or 3 of us stayed up all night in the closet with our laptops, writing our resumes so that other people could sleep in the main room while we were doing that. And we got like no sleep, and then we went to the conference and we had crappy passes that didn't let us do much of anything. We just went around and like handed resumes to people and didn't know what we were doing, didn't get invited to any parties or know anybody who was there, and we were really bad at networking, or at least I was. I feel like it's taken me 10 years to get to the point where like I know enough people who are gonna be at GDC that I want to talk to, that like I'm really excited about that, and I can make enough connections sort of online with people that I can get together with while I'm at GDC. That's really an interesting thing. Anyway, it was a great experience. I'm feeling really good about it. We made some good business connections and spent yesterday doing some product development that was really positive. I spent the plane ride home thinking about my Clue game and trying to refine it a little bit. I'm really excited about that. I just read or just finished listening to the audiobook version of Surface Detail by Ian M. Banks, which is fantastic. And I read one of his novels before that wasn't a culture novel called The Algebrist, which I really liked. I read that like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I thought it was really good, but it was really dense, and when I finished it, I sort of needed to like read something different. For whatever reason, maybe because this is a culture novel or because I listened to the audiobook, Surface Detail was like really fantastic, and I just want to keep reading. Like I want to go on to the next one or previous one or whatever. So I'm jazzed about that. I'm really excited. I feel like I'm in a good place. I got this new forum that I'm excited about. Like there's I feel like there's lots of stuff to be excited about. So I'm feeling good tonight. I'm not going to complain that it's a little bit too hot in LA, because I know that's probably not a complaint that's going to go over really well with everybody. But other than that, I'm doing well. I'm happy, and I'm glad. Honestly, like I'm glad to have so many people here hanging out, playing Half-Life with me, and chatting. So thank you all. And with that, I think I am going to go catch up on some more of the sleep that I missed this last week, because that was also really good. Yeah, thanks guys. This was great. My plan is to do another cast on Wednesday at 9. And I think this is going to be kind of more or less a schedule for me. Saturdays at 6 and Wednesdays at 9. After this Wednesday, I'm actually traveling a whole bunch. I'm going on a family reunion trip, so I'm going to be like a week or so where I'm not going to be able to do any streams. But I'll let you know about the scheduling for all of that somehow. We'll see how late Mostly Walking goes. Maybe I'll stream a little bit after Mostly Walking, but that tends to go pretty late, so probably not. Probably it'll be 9 o'clock on Wednesday. If you want sort of last minute updates, follow my Twitter. That's where I will sort of make any kinds of announcements, and I will also try to be active on this new forum website and see how well that goes. Let me know if you have any suggestions, feedback about the show, other stuff, feedback about the new website, any of that. Would love to hear it. Would just love to sort of know what you guys are thinking. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Have a good night or good day, wherever you are. And I'll see you next time.